Hi, Bradley. How are
Hi,
you?
Benny.
Welcome to Shirty Science Season Home. Thank you for letting your research be exposed to the community and see what creative ideas they come back to in response. And being a part of National Science Week, I think it's my favorite week of the year. I just want to start with a pretty basic question, which is, what inspired you to become a scientist?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, first, you acknowledge country, and look, I'm on Ngunnawal country as well, and acknowledge their elders, past, present, and I thank them for allowing me and my family to live on Ngunnawal country. So, science for me, it was really just enjoying answering questions on my own accord. You know, that I had a lot of questions about the earth and rivers and groundwater and had those connective aspects of surface water and groundwater. And I started off, I got ducks of geology after year 12. Yeah, that was many years ago though. And then started doing geology at University of Technology in Sydney. And like, I love learning about the earth, and I think that thirst for understanding how the earth works, but then also from a cultural point of view, I was listening to stories, you know, from aunties and uncles and grandparent talking about, you know, their country and their connection to country and what that means. So, you know, then I started moving towards the thinking about how can my cultural knowledge and my scientific Western knowledge come together. And I think that's the path I've been on for 20 odd years. And, you know, it's taken me down many routes, but I think it's the route I should be on. Yeah.
So can you tell us a bit more about then what your role is, or what you're sort of doing at University of Canberra then? Yeah,
sure. At the moment, I was doing a PhD, or still am. But unfortunately, COVID, I got really close to submission, but COVID cancelled my last field trip, and which was April, and which was unfortunate. But you know, that's people. You know, there's a lot more people worse off than me, unfortunately, and unfortunately for me, I still had a role, and that role was to try and identify cultural values that could influence, and cultural knowledge that could influence the way we manage our water. And I think that connection between Western and traditional is coming together, especially in the water space. And we sort of saw the fish kills recently in the lower Darling. You know, there was a real exposure of the way we value water, and unfortunately, the way water is valued is a dollar. You know, it's actually a commodity, it's tradable. And, you know, but working in government in that space, you know, water planning and management, you got to know how the water market works, and seeing how we value water really stressed me, you know, but it stressed a lot of people, you know, and seeing all those dead, big old Murray cods and yellow bellies and floating belly up in those rivers, you know, because it was toxic and it was blue-green algae, and, you know, that further inspired me to keep going, you know. And I thought, you know, we're going to do something about this, and I think hopefully my research will provide some credible evidence, because that's the challenge for us, is that a lot of our knowledge isn't written in journals and reports and things like that. So we don't have any reference points. So our elders don't, you know, they don't produce scientific journal papers and things like that. So for me to reference my traditional knowledge, sometimes the science doesn't allow for that. And I suppose I think it's my other challenge is to try and make sure that our knowledge is respected for what it is, you know. And I think being where I am, lucky, you know, I'm very lucky. Had a good education, big, proud Murray family. And I think that's the thing, is that those two can come together, and I've got my opportunity to be a voice for Aboriginal people. In the water space, I will never talk for other mobs or never talk at a national level. I will only, you know, talk if I'm allowed to from my elders.
Is there any example, I guess, across your research It's quite unfortunate that you couldn't do your last field trip, but have you kind of gained any knowledge? Is there an example that you can provide of some traditional knowledge, I guess, that you would like to sort of become a part of the way we do manage water? If that's not too big of a question.
The challenge is that the way we value Indigenous knowledge at the moment is not where it should be. You know, it's you know, the dreaming stories and the connections and the laws and the songs and the dances aren't seen as a science per se, you know what I mean? So it's the challenge for us is to try and expose the Western system that tells our knowledge that it's myth and legend and folklore, and it's mumbo jumbo and it's made up. But the problem is that our knowledge is a representation and you know, thousands of generations of observation of one's country that is a science. You know, we've tested country, we know country, we know how it responds when you add water, how you manipulate water, how you move water. We know the indicators, and I think that's the other bit. The science of knowing one's country is that, you know, country is telling you all the time of how it's feeling, and you know, there's at the moment, you know, through the fires and the droughts, we saw country sick and the people were sick too, you know. So that's the time when, you know, the Aboriginal people need to be involved. And I think, you know, we saw it, as I mentioned earlier, with the fish kills, you know, the Lower Darling, Barkindji country, you know, there was elders there you could see physically and emotionally stressed about seeing those fish belly up. But the problem is that their knowledge of their river wasn't accepted as a science. You know, there was two independent scientific panels, and our elders, our knowledge holders, weren't seen as scientific experts. So, you know, that's changing the culture of science as well as part of my journey.
So do you, I guess, thinking about, I guess, how you might sort of conduct your research, understanding that you're trying to fit something that I guess currently Western science doesn't quite accept, but hopefully one day you can help change that. What does your research kind of, I guess, look like on a day-to-day? If say you were to go into the field, do you work with elders? Are you collecting water samples? What does that might look like?
My area of study is the Guida wetlands, so it's on Kamilaroi country, and I suppose the challenge is there too, is that country, you know, it's around 20% of its original size as a wetland. So, you know, there's a lot of pressures around that wetland, and part of that wetland has come back into public ownership. So it was a lot of private landholders. There are some private landholders that want to see the wetland thrive and get it back to its glory. But, you know, there's a lot of development and a lot of diversion of water around this wetland. So the cultural connection, we've been locked out for the last 150 years. So, you know, the elders, they've been locked out. And so it's them, those stories are going to be still there. And I suppose it's getting our mob back out on country to reconnect with this place. You know, it's a very important place. You know, you've got migratory birds. It's part of the Ramsar network, so it's internationally significant. You've got, you know, the birds that turn up when there's water on this place is unbelievable, you know, and the frogs and all the animals that come to drink. You know, you've still got your pest animals, your pigs and your horses and whatever else. But the challenge is getting our people out there to reconnect, listen to country, and then, you know, it's working up how we can build a framework to make sure that knowledge goes into the way we manage that country. And at the moment, there's a lot of ecological responses that are recorded. And I think the traditional knowledge component I'm seeing is that, you know, some of the indicators will tell us when certain plants flower or certain winds, you know, there's a change in seasons. You know, those indicators that say that there should be water in the wetlands from a tradition, you know, cultural point of view. If they're telling us water is in there and water's not in there, then there's obviously we need to find the balance to get water back in there at those certain times. And, you know, it could be building a seasonal calendar for that country, but it's also making sure that our people can get access to this place, experience it, live it, love it, and reconnect, you know. And I think that's the exciting bit, you know, is that the mob out at Moree and Mungandai and surrounding towns don't really know they've got this in their backyard. Most non-Aboriginal people as well would be the same. They've got this beautiful wetland. When it's wet, when it's dry, it looks a bit sad, but that's the nature of our wetlands, is that that they do have that drying and wetting scenario. So we've just got to make sure that water's going in at the right time, whether that's from an ecological point of view, but also a cultural point of view. And that's the framework I'm looking to build. And I think there's, a lot of our old people have said over many, many years in our fight for access and right to talk about water is how can we, if you have an environmental flow that's delivering water for environmental benefits, not all cultural aspects, the Indigenous people won't have a say in that. So the cultural aspects may not be covered in that. And so I suppose if you have water that's delivered from an ecological and cultural point of view, that's informed by traditional knowledge, you're going to get much more benefit, and that's some of the science I want to test as well.
Okay.
And then I can say, I told you so.
Yeah, we've been telling this for hundreds and hundreds of years. I wish you luck on that journey, and yeah, I would love to see those different elements all coming together, right? Because as you say, you would then just have this waterway that is beautiful because it's well maintained and has this tie to culture, and there's just so much more learning to come from something versus it just being, I don't know, a wetland that you think about in the back of your house or back of your yard that you're, I don't know, annoyed about because it brings mosquitoes or something.
Yeah. But I just want to add too that, like if certain species are turning up, so there are definite cultural species that connect to this water. So if you've got good, healthy water, those species are going to turn up at the right time. Like an example is the brolga. If the brolga's turning up, doing its mating dance, our mob can sit there and watch that brolga dance. And then, a lot of our dancers mimic the brolga in ceremony, but also in our stories as well, So if the brolga and other species that are culturally significant, or the eagle, seagulls, you see seagulls there and wedge-tails, and if they're turning up to the wetland, then that's a good thing. Yeah.
Cool. So I guess the aim of Shirty Science is about visual. Do you have, images of these wetlands and sort of those Volga returning and things that we might be able to share with others after this conversation, possibly?
Yeah, I've got plenty of photos. Yeah.
Photos for days. I guess we talked about why you sort of wanted to become a scientist and kind of connect your two knowledges. What sort of a typical day looks like. Have we discussed that? Yeah, I think I
wafted off on that one.
That's okay. I guess, was there this specific one moment when you knew, water management, like this water space was where you wanted to go down? Or was there like a light bulb, or has it just sort of been a culmination of, your existence?
Yeah. I was thinking about what was, sort of that light bulb moment, but thinking back, I had a story in my head of 3 water holes for some reason. I'm not sure, but I ended up painting them, and that was just me painting what I pictured in my head. And then I was up on country, probably 15, 20 years ago, early 2000s it would have been, 20 years ago nearly. And I was talking to a lad, and we went out and saw some of the mob, and he was the catchment officer for that part of the world. And, we were talking to some of the, they were my nan's nieces and nephews, and they knew who she was, which was cool. And, she lived till she was 95. So she was well known throughout our country. And I suppose when I started talking about these 3 water holes, they knew exactly the water holes I was talking about. I'd never been to them in my life. And I think that was a real, I suppose, light bulb moment when I thought, the country's telling me something, I've painted it, and then, I'm sort of getting validation that, you painted something that you've dreamt, part of your dreaming, and, those sort of water holes, and, that painting became very significant for me, but it still really, it reconnected me with my knowledge in the water space. So, that was really cool. It's sort of, well, the hairs on the back of my neck, not on my head, but the hairs on the back of my neck stand up when I talk about it.
So did you sort of have a mentor or someone to then help, I guess, introduce you to that space? You mentioned someone who was working in water management. Or
Sorry?
Did you sort of have a mentor or someone who then, I guess, introduced you, or did you then, I guess, work with others on country to learn more about and learn, I guess, how have you learned?
Yeah. Like I'm still only a boy in cultural speak, like I'm still learning who I am, and like I know who I am and where I'm from and my connection, my places, my stories. But, Western science, bachelor and masters and all that sort of stuff, but still that an Indigenous scientist I had in my performance agreement while I was at CSIRO for 3 or 4 years. And I'm still looking for a Indigenous science mentor. So, there's not many of us out there. A lot of my uncles I would always go to, and a lot of them are passed, unfortunately, but, they sort of put me on the right track. And I suppose getting back to country is always crucial as well. Thinking about who you are and where you're from and reconnecting. And, like I'm in Canberra, so I'm, 900 Ks from country. So it's a bit hard to get there all the time when you can, but it's, I think it keeps you grounded. And I suppose country is my mentor. It'll tell me a lot of things that, mentors can't. And, I think I've gone through my career without that sort of mentorship, but I've now become the mentor rather than the mentee. So, my hope is to encourage a generation, my generation or the next generation or the generation that, my kids, is to think about science as a career pathway, So that's science, we're going to make science a bit more sexy for our mob, that it's achievable. If I can do it, anyone can do it. And, that's been my go-to line whenever I talk to students or whatever, because, like I tell the story that I went from year 10 to year 11 and I changed schools, and the year 11 maths science coordinator said I'd never be good at maths and science, so I shouldn't do it. And I thought, no, bugger that, I really enjoy it. And so, I got to do biology and geology. I couldn't do physics or chemistry or any hard maths. I had to do maths in the garden. That's what it felt like, counting bugs. But in the end, I got into uni to do a Bachelor of Science, and, I'm doing what was equivalent to, say, 3 and 4 unit maths. I had no idea, I didn't even know what algebra was, it was just a whole new language for me. So I had to learn the hard way, but I suppose I got through all that, got through the bachelor and, the masters, and, I was doing subjects in my masters that I'd never thought I'd be able to get just a little P, the pass, that elusive pass you want. But, some I got distinctions, and, you just sort of think, well, bloody hell, I've done that, and I think that's the thing, is that our mob may perceive that science is out of reach. It's too hard, and it's not. It's definitely not. And, what I also talk about is that, when I go out on country, you're listening to some of the oldest water stories on the planet. And, that should be exciting, that should be celebrated as well by our nation. But I think it's something that we need to really think about as a nation, is that, this is some of the oldest knowledge on the planet. And, then we have the driest inhabited continent on Earth, Australia, and those two should be fitting together, the oldest knowledge, driest inhabited, water management, and I think that's the space I'm in. And that's the hope that we can change the way we value water, but also manage it.
Yeah, that was going to lead on to my next question of when, I guess, do you think you could sort of hang up your boots and be like, I have done what I wanted to do as a researcher and a scientist.
Yeah, I don't think I will. Yeah, it's, even if, like I nearly won the 80 million. I had 6 out of 8 numbers. Nearly got the 80 mil. It was only a couple hundred in the end. But I think if I won the 80 mil, I'd still be doing what I'm doing, And I think the challenge is, for me, is to make sure if I'm having an impact where I am, then I'm in a good place. And, throughout my career, if I get impacted or I'm not having an impact where I am, it's time to move on. And, I think that's something that I've used throughout, as a motto for myself, to make sure that if I'm having an impact, I got to stay there. Yeah. And I think this space here, in the university system, you have that thing called academic freedom. So, I've got a bit of freedom to say things that I wouldn't be able to say if I'm in government. As long as I'm backed by credible evidence and research and I'm well informed and I'm not telling fibs. But, that's the thing, is that I can pretty much say and say what I want, which is cool.
That is cool, especially when it's backed by evidence, and it is I look up to you, I guess, Bradley, in what you're trying to do and achieve, and I hope to hear many more voices like yourself kind of advocating for this idea of Indigenous knowledge and how we can kind of incorporate it into what we do with our country and our land. I have one sort of last question, and that is, so I guess, Shirty Science, what I hope to achieve with it is that someone stops someone on the street and goes, wow, cool t-shirt. And then the person responds, yeah, it's a Shirty Science shirt and it's about blah. I guess, what do you want people talking about and having conversations about in regards to your research and what you're trying to do and achieve?
Wow, what's my pitch? I think country has to be a key part. Like when we think about a lot of Indigenous art, there's, water is a key part of telling stories in a lot of Indigenous art and stories and songs, because it's, if you didn't know where water was, you're not going to last long in the Australian context. So I think water has to be a key part of it. People on country, plants and animals, the frogs, the birds, the broggers dancing. It's going to be a very busy shirt, I've no doubt.
Everything coming together.
Yeah. And I think there's, it'd be great if there was some Indigenous artists out there that had a crack, and, that'd be really cool. So, but, I can't wait to see what comes up. Yeah.
We'll see what we can come with. I guess out there to the audience and people viewing in, if anyone has any questions, you can do it in the comments down here. But if not, we might let Bradley get on with his Monday night and let you all have a go at being creative. If you do have any examples or drawings or ideas or drafts that you want to send through or have someone comment on, you can direct message them to us on Instagram or send them through email at shirtyscience@gmail.com, and we'll share them through, and I'll share them with Brad and provide comments back. So if you have, this is just the beginning of the process. If you've been I've been super inspired by what Brad had to say. We are here. Our inboxes are open. Thank you so much, Brad. I guess one last thing, do you have any other plans for National Science Week?
I've got to give a presentation tomorrow to Uni of Queensland, so talking about Indigenous methodologies and science. And so pretty much what we talked about. So hopefully I get a few people dialing into that Zoom, so we'll see what happens. I think my week is pretty busy, so there's always plenty happening. And like the Indigenous stuff is starting to pop up especially in the sciences. So the astronomy, the fire knowledge is really, it's I don't want to use a pun, but it's a hot topic, especially after recent fires with the devastating fires we had. And Indigenous knowledge is starting to weave its way into certain spaces. And unfortunately for the water space, the fires kicked in after the fish kills. So everyone forgot about the water, and then everyone was forgetting about the fires because of COVID. And, I suppose that's the cycle we've got to get used to. But I think we've got to strike while the iron's hot, and Indigenous knowledge in water has to be there. Yeah.
Yeah. And I hope that we can get you a cool shirt. One shirt.
Yeah. Great. Can't wait.
All righty. Awesome. Thank you so much, Brad, for joining us. And we'll catch you soon.
Yeah.